The Episcopal Church, like most Christian denominations, is facing a decline in membership. In our diocese, many of our churches can only afford a part-time or shared clergy. As our bishop and chief pastor, how would you lead us to address this trend?
So first of all, let me just start by saying today, and I'm sure others have mentioned this, today we started in where there is no clergy person, and where the people of the parish are maintaining this amazing food pantry that they told us served over 500 people last month. And they're doing all that work out of their own parish budget. When we say that the church is not the clergy, the church is the people, if you don't believe that, you can just go look at where. Take a drive. The truth is that people in the Diocese of Western Massachusetts and across the country are finding new ways to do ministry. And some of that involves ordained leadership, and more lay leaders are expected to stand up and do more and more. It raises all kinds of really fundamental questions for us as Episcopalians. And I think that the leadership, the structures, the General Convention, bishops, the House of Deputies, we all need to begin to look at this new reality and think about what that means. I'm not going to tell you what it means, but I can tell you some of the things that I'm wondering about. That if you were to call me as your bishop, I would ask us to wonder about together. One of the things that I wonder about is whether or not we've locked ourselves too much in some ideas that don't make sense anymore. For instance, the idea that only priests can consecrate and distribute communion. I think we need to look at the role that deacons could play. We need to be open to the possibility that, those rules and ideas and theologies may have made sense when every church could reasonably afford to have a priest. But if that's no longer true, surely our theology cannot mean that some churches can be rich enough to have Eucharist weekly, while other churches who are poorer have to have a different kind of service. Surely that is not a reflection of our gospel values. So we need to think about that. I also think that the time is coming, and it's coming soon, that we need to think about whether or not all priests need to go to a residential seminary. More and more seminaries are offering non-residential and free programs at CDSP. There are also programs that are being developed at the Seminary of the Southwest where people are able to go online and take classes and study. Back in the 1700s, when you prepared for holy orders, you read with a priest. The general ordination exams were meant to ensure that even when people were prepared in other ways, there was a way to standardize our information and to make sure that we all had the kind of preparation to guarantee that Episcopal priests would be well qualified, well educated, and well spoken. We can return to some of those earlier standards. I think it's time for us to look at the way we do insurance. I think it's time for us to re-examine some of the fixed cost And we need to make sure that the church is nimble as we continue to go through this period of decline. I also believe that this period of decline will not last forever. And at the same time, we need to plant seeds, because if history is our teacher, we know that the church will once again have a surge of ministry and power, and that is hard to see now. But it has always happened in American history. I believe that someday we will look back on this time and we'll be judged by the ways that we address these shortages, by the faith and the hope and the creativity that we use to get through this moment.
Thank you. Provocative ideas. I know, I'm going to go home and think about these things.
Nice, me too.
Okay. Knowing that the churches of the diocese range from red to blue to purple, what role do you believe the bishop and diocese play in fostering dialogues across differences? And how will you support the clergy and leaders that are doing this important work?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I have always prided myself on preaching from the pulpit as if everyone in my parish disagreed with me politically. Which sometimes was probably just preaching from the pulpit to people that I knew. But I started that early in my ministry because I was ordained in 1999. I was a gay priest at a time that was a really, really dangerous, provocative thing to be. And I had an expectation that I could go to any Episcopal church in this country, hear a prayer book service and a sermon preached with a word I could take for the rest of the week. And I want people, the most conservative people I know, to feel comfortable worshiping in my church. That's how I understand the Episcopal Church to be. It's a place where my most conservative relatives, my most liberal relatives can meet together and worship together and all feel enriched by the experience. In order to do that kind of work, you have to preach and work from a place not of politics, but of values. And I can't think of a better place to look for values than our baptismal covenant. At the end of the day, we all are united in some very basic understandings of the teaching of Jesus Christ. And we know that we need to love God and love our neighbor. We know that we need to respect the dignity of every human being. And in my experience, as long as we stay centered on that central ground, people will respect us. People will hear us. The problem is that we're living in a time right now that is so volatile and seems to gravitate toward these huge swings of emotion. And at a time like this in our country, the temptation is to react to every provocative thing that we see or hear or experience. What I'd like to see us do is to cultivate the kind of faith that allows us to respond from a deep place of value, to be able to speak out on the most important issues of the day with a clarity and a simplicity and the confidence that Jesus has taught us that we must love our neighbors as ourselves. We know that we are to respect the dignity of every human being. And as long as we do that, we should do that as proudly and as loudly as we can, knowing that we are not responding to any political voice or moment in our country, but we are grounded in our faith and sure of our salvation.
Our next question actually builds on the same issue from a slightly different angle. How do you understand the role as bishop in fostering a sense of belonging and community for people from all cultural and ethnic backgrounds?
The amazing gift of the Episcopal Church is that it can contain both the most liberal and most conservative members of my family. We can all share a pew at Christmas Eve, but it also extends beyond this country, right? One of the magical gifts that we have is the gift of the Anglican Communion. And so we truly have brothers and sisters in our faith all across the world. In Africa and Asia, in Hong Kong, in Central and South America, we all share a common value and a common commitment to the Anglican tradition. That has allowed me as a person to lean into the diversity both of the global communion and also in our own individual areas. I am blessed to live in a place much like many of you who live in Worcester do, where we are surrounded by people of different cultures and backgrounds and languages, and what a gift that is. What a gift that is. And so I think that we make space for those conversations and those people by showing respect, by listening to others, and by being willing to be open to learning about different cultures and having our worldview shaped and enriched by those encounters. In my own church, I have done that. I share a church with Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish, which is largely from Oaxaca, Mexico. And that was a relationship that I inherited as rector. And I was a little humbled by that because I don't speak Spanish. And it was a great desire of the congregation that we would be closer. We were able to build relationships largely through food. I like to eat. I like to eat all kinds of food. And it turns out that's a great gift. And so I found myself going and sharing in their meals and eating tamales. And the more that they found out that I like spicy food, the better we got along. I think that being able to be in relationship with people transcends language, transcends culture, and ultimately teaches us that your joys are my joys and your burdens are my burdens, right? That's what friends know about each other. And so for me, church is a great place to welcome people, to meet people, and to be in relationship with people because we know that God is our parent. And whether or not you like father language or mother language, God is the great parent, which means that we are all brothers and sisters. And so I would approach relationships with other cultural traditions in much the same way, by showing up, by being willing to be open and in relationship, and by letting people know widely that I enjoy spicy food. And if you have some hot sauce that is good with your culture, please bring that for me.
Okay, moving along a little bit. Given our dwindling congregations and increasing property costs, it is becoming much harder for parishes to afford a full-time or even a part-time priest. How do you see the role of bishop in encouraging and developing the leadership by the laity in order to preserve church communities?
Sure. Again, I remind you of the time that I spent earlier today and where. I believe that church is any place where people are trying to follow Jesus and do the work of the gospel in the world. I have been a priest. I'll be celebrating the 26th anniversary of my ordination next month. So I have had the privilege of working full-time in the church for a long time. And I will do everything I can in my power, if I were to become your bishop, to make sure that we had as many full-time opportunities for clergy as we could. Because I believe that it takes, at least for me, a long time to grow into being an effective pastor. It takes a long time and a lot of patience from the laity. And I believe that that opportunity should still continue to exist where we can make it. And I have some ideas about that I'll be happy to talk to you about. But sometimes, for whatever reasons, churches are not able to sustain full-time ministry. And the lay leaders of the parish have an opportunity to step up into leadership. And when that happens, that is grace. And we should all be so excited, and the church should be so supportive of that. Because running a church, keeping a community together is hard, holy work. And we can do some things to support lay leaders in that. One of the things that Seminary of the Southwest is doing now is they are also offering classes online for lay leaders to help train them in leading worship and to also help them in understanding the basics of church administration. We can also offer classes in the Diocese of Western Massachusetts that enrich and enhance those skills, because running a church is a particular kind of ministry that takes a long time and a lot of effort to do well. We can also make sure that those folks who are bravely holding on to parishes and working hard are supported both by local clergy and also by the bishop's office, making sure that they have a hotline and a number to call when problems emerge, because they will. When surprises happen or things go wrong, they need to know that there are people who will get in the car and drive out to wherever they are and help them walk through next steps. There are things that I know as a parish priest, not because I'm especially smart or especially gifted, but because I've been doing this work for so long, I know who to call. I think it's important that we not tell lay leaders that they have all the authority and none of the resources to be able to do that work. And I think that if we need them to do that work, and we owe it to the parishes to do everything we can to support them.
Okay. Our fifth question has to do with more diocesan structure. The canons of our church call for each diocese to appoint a standing committee which has certain defined roles and responsibilities, amongst which is to act as a body of advice to the bishop. As our bishop, how do you envision working with the standing committee?
I have to tell you that the first moment, the first glimmer of thinking that I might be called as a bishop, I never told anybody this, but it was because I loved standing committee so much. And I knew I wasn't supposed to love it as much as I did. And I just really loved it so much. And my favorite moment on standing committee, there was a church in our diocese that had just gone into a property development deal and was going to be coming into a lot of money, right? This is New York. It was a Manhattan church. They were going to be coming into a lot of money. They had never had an endowment. They didn't want an endowment. Instead, they wanted to build a building, an outreach building. And our bishop wanted them to build this outreach building. After all, what bishop would say, no, we don't want an outreach building? Wow. On standing committee, I said, I think this is a mistake. I'd love to have the outreach building, but you need to put some of that money into an endowment. Because even though your church is growing right now, even though you can balance your budget right now, you need to plan for the future. You need to be smart about that. And the outreach building can be a little smaller, or you can wait a little longer and build the building that you want. Well, I got to tell you, the rector in Manhattan did not appreciate the rector in the Hudson Valley having this very wise counsel. That did not go over. But the bishop heard me, and the people on standing committee heard me, and we wound up insisting that an endowment was started. Now, I have to tell you, the good news about this story is the rector of that parish, who was not thrilled with me at the time, has since become a very good friend and will walk up and hug me, and I think we're good now. The standing committee has a really special role to play. The standing committee is to me one of the critical voices in the diocese, because it gives it makes explicit, right, that we are all related to one another. And that what you do in Springfield affects the people in the Berkshires. And it makes explicit the fact that the folks in Ware have a stake in what happens in Shrewsbury. It makes it explicit that we are one body. And that sometimes your friends, your colleagues, your brothers and sisters in Christ can see something a little more clearly in your context than you can see it at the time. So I love standing committee because it deals with the most essential issues for Western Massachusetts right now, right? It deals with property. It deals with discipline. It deals with the issues that affect all of us. And standing committee is the place that the bishop can come and say, this is what's happening. What do you think? It's a place where the bishop can truly get advice and wisdom and counsel. And I think that is such a precious part of our church governance. And I am so grateful to be part of a church that builds that into the fabric of how we govern ourselves.